The screen lit up, casting a cold, sterile glow across the shadows of my bedroom. My phone, once a harmless conveyor of silly memes, school updates, and weekend plans, buzzed with a single, life-altering notification. It wasn't a message. It wasn't even private. It was a declaration, a digital gut punch wrapped in forced cheer. Officially single and ready to mingle. Freedom never felt so good. The caption blared beneath a photo of Mark, my husband of 15 years, grinning ear to ear, his arm slung around a woman I'd never seen before. Not a conversation. Not a goodbye. A post. A hashtagged execution. My breath caught a sharp, cracked sound in the stillness, as the edges of the world seemed to fray. Not from tears. Not yet. But from something deeper, a violent disorientation, like the floor had vanished beneath me. This wasn't heartbreak. It was humiliation, curated, captioned, and served to the world. The silence that once wrapped our home in peace now pressed in like a vacuum. The hum of the heater, the ticking of the clock, the nothingness, all of it screamed with absence. My heart pounded loud enough to drown it all out. And that was the moment I knew, he hadn't just left. He had erased me. Before I dive into the rest of this story, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever been blindsided by betrayal and clawed your way back, hit that like and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. Our life, before that shattering post, had been a comfortable hum of shared routines and unspoken understandings. It was a life woven from small, ordinary threads that, when taken together, felt like an impenetrable tapestry. Mornings began with the comforting aroma of brewing coffee, a ritual Mark and I had perfected over a decade and a half. He liked his black, strong enough to stand a spoon in. I preferred mine with a splash of almond milk, a concession to a minor dietary shift I'd made years ago. We'd sit at the kitchen island, the soft glow of the early sun filtering through the window, scrolling through news headlines on our tablets, occasionally sharing a wry comment or a piece of interesting trivia. His hand would often find mine, a silent affirmation of our connection, a familiar warmth that I'd come to rely on more than I ever consciously acknowledged. My work as a senior project manager at Sterling Corp., a large tech firm downtown, was demanding but fulfilling. I thrived on the organized chaos of deadlines and the collaborative energy of my team. My days were a blur of meetings, spreadsheets, and problem-solving, punctuated by the occasional office banter that broke the corporate formality. I remembered one Tuesday morning, just a few months prior, when our junior analyst, Liam, had accidentally sent a company-wide email with a gif of a dancing cat. The ensuing laughter had echoed through the open-plan office, a light-hearted moment that made the daily grind feel a little less like a grind. I'd come home that evening, still chuckling, to find Mark in the kitchen, already starting dinner. He was a decent cook, not a gourmet chef, but his pasta sauces were legendary among our friends, rich and comforting, smelling of slow-simmered tomatoes and garlic. Evenings were our sanctuary. We'd often eat on the small patio overlooking our meticulously maintained garden, the scent of blooming jasmine mingling with the savory steam from our plates. We'd talk about our day, the triumphs and frustrations, the small victories and the minor irritations. Sometimes, we'd simply sit in companionable silence, listening to the chirping crickets and the distant murmur of traffic, a quiet symphony that underscored our contentment. Weekends were reserved for longer hikes in the state park, our boots crunching on fallen leaves, or leisurely strolls through the farmer's market, picking out fresh produce for the week. We had a standing Sunday tradition of making homemade pizza, Mark expertly tossing the dough while I chopped the toppings. It was in these small, repetitive acts, these shared moments, that our life together was built. We didn't have children, a choice we'd made early on, prioritizing our careers and our freedom to travel. Our vacations were epic, filled with impulsive road trips through national parks, lingering afternoons in sun-drenched European cafes, and adventurous dives in crystal-clear Caribbean waters. Our home, a charming craftsman bungalow in a quiet, tree-lined suburb, was filled with souvenirs from these adventures: a colorful tapestry from Morocco, a set of hand-painted ceramics from Italy, a framed photograph of us standing atop a snow-capped mountain peak. Each item told a story, a chapter in our shared history, a testament to the life we were building, brick by carefully laid brick. I remembered the day we bought the house, 10 years ago almost to the day. Mark had carried me over the threshold, laughing, promising me a lifetime of happiness within its walls. I'd believed him implicitly. Why wouldn't I? Every action, every word, every shared smile had reinforced that belief. I had invested every fiber of my being into this life, into us. My career was important, yes, but my home, my relationship with Mark, was the anchor, the steadying force in my world. I'd poured my energy, my love, my financial stability into creating this shared haven, sacrificing late nights at the office to be home for dinner, for conversations, for just being together. There was no part of me that wasn't deeply intertwined with the man I thought I knew. The first cracks, subtle as hairline fractures in glass, began to appear so gradually that I barely registered them at first. They were small shifts, almost imperceptible, easy to dismiss as normal fluctuations in a long-term relationship. Mark, always meticulous about his appearance, started spending an unusual amount of time on his phone, scrolling through social media with a new intensity. He'd chuckle at something, then quickly dim the screen if I walked into the room. A flicker of defensiveness in his eyes. I'd chalked it up to work stress, perhaps a new hobby, maybe even a secret obsession with online gaming. I told myself he was entitled to his private moments. Then came the late nights. He started working longer hours, or so he claimed. He'd arrive home after I'd already eaten dinner, sometimes after I'd already gone to bed. He'd offer vague explanations about project deadlines or unexpected client emergencies. His clothes, once neatly folded and put away, began accumulating in a forgotten pile in the corner of his side of the closet. The familiar scent of his cologne, a subtle blend of sandalwood and citrus, was often masked by a faint, unfamiliar floral fragrance. I remember one evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, I found a small, delicate silver earring tangled in the fibers of his dress shirt. It wasn't mine. My earrings were bold, statement pieces, never dainty. My stomach did a little flip, a tiny, unsettling flutter. When I asked him about it, he shrugged, attributing it to a loose button from a colleague's shirt, an accidental snag in a crowded elevator. His explanation sounded plausible enough at the time, delivered with his usual easy charm, and I, eager to believe, let it go. My heart, however, retained a tiny, almost imperceptible ache. He started traveling more for work, or so he said. Short trips at first, then longer ones. He'd forget to call when he arrived, or his phone would mysteriously be off when I tried to reach him. His explanations became increasingly elaborate, yet strangely hollow. A conference in Chicago, a client meeting in San Francisco, a workshop in Atlanta. He'd bring back small, impersonal gifts, usually airport novelties, a keychain, a coffee mug. Not the thoughtful, quirky souvenirs he used to pick up, items that spoke to inside jokes or shared memories. The intimacy that had once flowed so effortlessly between us began to feel forced, a conscious effort rather than a natural current. Our conversations became superficial, revolving around logistics and household chores, devoid of the emotional depth that had once characterized our bond. We stopped laughing together. The shared silences, once comforting, now felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken words. One Saturday morning, while tidying up the study, I stumbled upon a small, unmarked USB drive tucked away in a drawer beneath a stack of old financial statements. Curiosity, a dangerous thing, gnawed at me. I hesitated for only a moment, then plugged it into my laptop. What flashed on the screen sent a cold shiver down my spine. Not work documents, as I'd half expected, but photos. Dozens of them. Photos of Mark, not alone, but with the same woman from his public social media announcement. They were laughing, holding hands, her head resting on his shoulder in a tropical setting. A beach, white sand, turquoise water. A sunset cruise, their silhouettes outlined against a fiery sky. The same woman, the one from the public post, was undeniably present in each one. This wasn't a one-time encounter, this was a sustained, intimate affair. This was betrayal, not a lapse in judgment. This was a parallel life, carefully constructed and hidden from me, while I continued to live out our shared reality, oblivious. The hum of the laptop fan was the only sound in the room, a stark contrast to the deafening roar in my ears. The world outside the window, bright and ordinary, suddenly felt alien, distant. The photos were dated, spanning over a year, their smiling faces a cruel mockery of the life I thought I had. This wasn't a sudden break, this was a deliberate, drawn-out deception. The casual cruelty of his social media announcement wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act, it was the final, arrogant flourish of a man who had already moved on, leaving me to discover his abandonment in the most public and humiliating way possible. This was more than just a gut punch, it was a devastating earthquake, shaking the very foundations of my existence. The initial shock was a physical blow, leaving me breathless and reeling. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the smiling, attentive husband I thought I knew with the deceitful stranger captured in those photos. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I stumbled to the nearest chair, gripping the arms tightly as if to anchor myself to a rapidly spinning world. The pain was sharp, an agonizing twist in my gut, but it was quickly followed by a searing, incandescent anger. Not just anger at Mark, but at myself. How could I have been so blind? So foolish? Had I missed all the signs, or had I simply chosen to ignore them, burying my head in the sand of blissful ignorance? Guilt, sharp and biting, gnawed at me. Guilt for not seeing it sooner, for allowing myself to be so thoroughly deceived. The emotions swirled, a chaotic maelstrom of hurt, rage, and profound disappointment. For hours, I sat there, the laptop still open on my lap, the incriminating images burning into my retinas. I felt like a foolish caricature, the unsuspecting wife, the last to know. The humiliation was almost as unbearable as the betrayal itself. But amidst the swirling chaos, a tiny, almost imperceptible spark ignited. A flicker of resolve. I wasn't going to crumble. I wasn't going to let him reduce me to a weeping victim. I had built a life, a career, a sense of self that existed independently of Mark. He might have tried to demolish our shared world, but he wouldn't demolish me. The decision to act wasn't a sudden epiphany, it was a slow, deliberate hardening of my resolve, forged in the crucible of my pain. I closed the laptop, the screen going dark, but the images remained etched in my mind. I took a deep, shaky breath, then another, until my breathing steadied. I stood up, walked to the bathroom, and splashed cold water on my face. Looking at my reflection, I saw not a broken woman, but a woman with tired eyes, yes, but also with a new glint of determination. This wasn't about revenge, not truly. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming my narrative, protecting my future, and ensuring that his cruel actions didn't define me. The first step was to detach, to create an emotional distance. I started treating Mark with a polite indifference, a quiet coolness that he seemed to barely notice. He was too consumed by his own self-importance, his secret life, to pick up on the subtle shift in my demeanor. I continued with our routines, the morning coffee, the shared dinners, the casual conversations, but my mind was elsewhere, meticulously piecing together the fragments of his deception, observing him with a newfound clarity, seeing him for the first time as he truly was, not as I had imagined him to be. Every vague explanation, every late night, every forgotten call suddenly made sense, slotting into place with chilling precision. The mask he wore was no longer invisible to me. I began to gather my resources, quietly and systematically. I revisited my financial statements, scrutinizing every joint account, every shared investment. I reviewed our marriage prenuptial agreement, a document I had barely glanced at since we signed it, trusting implicitly that it would never be needed. I made a mental inventory of our shared assets, our property, our savings. I knew I couldn't afford to be caught off guard, not again. The memory of that public social media announcement, the casual cruelty of it, burned bright, fueling my resolve. He thought he could discard me with a public post, that he could humiliate me and walk away unscathed. He was about to learn a very hard lesson. My vulnerability, once a source of pain, was now transforming into a wellspring of quiet, steely power. I wasn't going to be a victim. I was going to be an architect of my own destiny, and a silent force to be reckoned with. The shift from shock to strategic planning felt empowering, each small step a reclamation of my agency. The crucial turning point came not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a quiet, deliberate conversation with a lawyer. I chose Evelyn Thorne, a family law attorney known for her sharp intellect and no-nonsense approach. Her office was minimalist, sleek, and efficient, much like Evelyn herself. The soft hum of the air conditioning was the only sound as I recounted the slow unraveling of my marriage, the subtle signs, the USB drive, and finally, the public social media announcement. Evelyn listened patiently, her expression unreadable, occasionally scribbling notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, her gaze steady and direct. "Georgia," she began, her voice calm and measured, "you have a strong case. The public announcement, while crude, actually works in your favor. It's an undeniable declaration of his intent to end the marriage, and it provides a very public timeline." We began to meticulously plan my strategy. My priority was to protect my financial future and to ensure that Mark's cavalier attitude would have consequences beyond just a public declaration. Evelyn outlined the legal framework, explaining the intricacies of property division, spousal support, and the dissolution of joint accounts. We agreed that discretion was paramount. I needed to continue acting as if nothing was amiss, to allow Mark to remain oblivious to the quiet storm brewing beneath the surface of our seemingly normal life. He was so confident in his deception, so sure of his control, that he wouldn't suspect a thing. That was my advantage. The first strategic move was to secure our joint finances. Evelyn advised me to open a separate, private bank account, transferring a portion of my earnings into it, enough to cover my immediate expenses and a contingency fund. This wasn't about siphoning money, it was about creating a safety net, ensuring I wouldn't be left financially vulnerable if he decided to freeze our joint accounts or disappear with our shared funds. I executed the transfer discreetly, making sure it didn't raise any red flags on our shared bank statements. Next, we focused on evidence. The USB drive, with its trove of incriminating photos, was a goldmine. Evelyn advised me to back up the images to an encrypted cloud server and to print hard copies, securely stored. We also gathered screenshots of his social media post, noting the timestamp and the comments it had generated. Each piece of evidence was a brick in the wall I was building around myself, a shield against his anticipated aggression. The real game-changer, however, came unexpectedly. One evening, Mark was out working late, and I was in the study, reviewing some old tax documents. I noticed a faint, almost imperceptible red light blinking on a small, decorative clock on his desk. It wasn't a clock I recognized. Out of curiosity, I picked it up. It was a voice recorder, subtly disguised. My heart pounded as I pressed play. What followed sent a chill down my spine. It was a recording of a conversation between Mark and his mistress. They were discussing their future plans, his intention to leave me, and, most damningly, a plan to liquidate certain joint assets and transfer the funds before the divorce proceedings began, effectively attempting to hide them. He even mentioned a specific offshore account he was setting up. He had recorded this himself, perhaps as a morbid trophy, or a way to relive his infidelity. The irony was exquisite. He had, in his arrogance, provided me with the ultimate weapon. I immediately contacted Evelyn. Her reaction was swift and decisive. "Georgia, this is huge. This proves intent to defraud. It changes everything." The power dynamic shifted dramatically. What was once a straightforward divorce case now had the potential to expose his unethical, if not illegal, financial maneuvers. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore, it was about calculated deceit. This audio recording, his own words, his own voice, was the pivotal plot twist, the hidden asset that would turn the tide definitively in my favor. It was the moment the balance of power irrevocably swung from him to me. I felt a surge of cold, exhilarating vindication. He had underestimated me. He had underestimated my quiet observation, my methodical nature, and my newfound resolve. He had built his betrayal on a foundation of lies, but I now held the blueprint to dismantle it, piece by calculated piece. With the audio recording as my trump card, the unfolding of my secret plans began to take on a precise, almost surgical quality. Every action was calculated, every move designed to dismantle Mark's carefully constructed facade without him ever suspecting a thing. The satisfaction, a quiet hum beneath the surface of my daily life, was immense. The first step was to freeze the accounts he had mentioned on the recording. Evelyn worked swiftly and discreetly with her network of financial forensics experts. They traced the offshore account he had referenced and, armed with the audio evidence, secured a temporary restraining order on the funds. Mark, still oblivious, continued his charade, making casual comments about an upcoming business trip that I now knew was a cover for his attempt to access those funds. The thought of him arriving at the bank, only to find his illicit scheme thwarted, brought a wry, almost bittersweet smile to my face. While Evelyn handled the legal and financial intricacies, I focused on gathering more passive intelligence. I began to subtly redirect mail to a P.O. box, ensuring any crucial documents related to our shared assets came directly to me first. I changed passwords to shared online accounts, citing a general security update when he inevitably asked. He barely noticed, distracted by his own clandestine activities. The house, once a shared sanctuary, became my strategic command center. I'd spend evenings, after he'd gone to bed or was out working late, meticulously organizing documents, cross-referencing dates, and making detailed notes. The familiar hum of the refrigerator, the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, these were the sounds of my quiet revolution. My emotional detachment grew stronger with each passing day. I no longer felt the pang of hurt or the sting of humiliation when he'd come home late, his clothes smelling faintly of a stranger's perfume. Instead, I felt a calm, clinical resolve. He was no longer my husband, he was a problem to be solved, a puzzle to be meticulously reassembled and exposed. His arrogance became his greatest weakness. He believed he was several steps ahead, orchestrating his escape with cunning precision. He believed I was still the naive, trusting wife. This miscalculation was his undoing. I remembered one evening, he came home, looking particularly pleased with himself, whistling a jaunty tune. He launched into a rambling story about a difficult client meeting that had stretched late into the night. I nodded, feigning interest, offering appropriate murmurs of sympathy. Inside, I was smiling. He was so transparent, so utterly predictable in his deceit. The conversation about his work felt like a thinly veiled performance, and I was the unwitting audience. He had no idea I held the script, and that I was about to rewrite the ending. The satisfaction came in small, exquisite doses. The email from Evelyn confirming the freeze on the offshore account. The quiet click as I locked away another folder of damning evidence. The almost imperceptible shift in Mark's demeanor when his plan subtly began to unravel, a flicker of confusion in his eyes when something he expected to happen didn't. He'd make a phone call, then frown, his brow furrowed in frustration. He wouldn't articulate it, but I knew he was encountering obstacles, unseen roadblocks I had placed in his path. It was like watching a spider caught in its own web, slowly realizing it was ensnared. My actions felt earned, a just response to the profound betrayal I had endured. It wasn't about bitterness, it was about restoration. Restoration of my dignity, my financial security, and my sense of self. He had announced our divorce on social media, treating our 15 years of marriage as a disposable commodity. He had sought to humiliate me publicly. My response, however, was quiet, precise, and devastatingly effective. He was beginning to face consequences, not through emotional outbursts or desperate pleas, but through the calm, methodical execution of a plan he never saw coming. The slow, inevitable creep of reality was starting to set in for him, a quiet dread he couldn't articulate or escape. And I, Georgia, was orchestrating every single, satisfying second of it. The aftermath was a slow-motion unraveling, a dramatic cascade of consequences that played out both publicly and privately. Mark's public social media announcement, intended to be his grand declaration of freedom, instead became the catalyst for his public downfall. The initial flurry of likes and congratulatory comments quickly turned into a barrage of questions and then, as the truth slowly emerged, outrage. When Evelyn officially filed the divorce papers, complete with the damning audio recording and the meticulously documented evidence of his financial malfeasance, the legal system moved swiftly. The first major blow came in the form of a court order freezing all his assets, including the offshore account he had so smugly believed was untouchable. The look on his face when he received the notice was priceless. Confusion first, then a slow dawning of horrified realization. He called me, his voice a strained whisper, a desperate attempt to sound reasonable. "Georgia, what is this? There's been a mistake." I simply replied, my voice calm and steady, "No mistake, Mark. You made your choices. Now you face the consequences." He sputtered, threatened, but I hung up, the click of the receiver a final, definitive period on that conversation. His financial ruin was swift and decisive. The funds he'd attempted to hide were seized, and the court imposed significant penalties for his fraudulent activities. His carefully constructed life of deceit crumbled around him. His mistress, who had clearly been with him for his perceived wealth and status, quickly abandoned him once his financial troubles became public. The social media world, which he had used to humiliate me, now turned on him with a vengeance. His post, once a declaration of freedom, became a monument to his spectacular downfall. Comments flooded in, not just from our mutual acquaintances, but from strangers, condemning his actions, dissecting his arrogance. He became a cautionary tale, a viral example of betrayal gone wrong. The public ostracism, I knew, stung him deeply, far more than any financial loss. His pride, his carefully cultivated image, was shattered beyond repair. For me, the journey was one of gradual recovery and profound self-discovery. The initial shock gave way to a deep sense of relief, followed by a quiet wave of exhaustion. The daily strain of maintaining a facade, of living with a betrayal of that magnitude, had taken its toll. But with each legal victory, each step towards financial independence, a lightness began to return to my spirit. I found solace in the quiet routines I had cultivated before the chaos, my morning coffee, but now enjoyed in peaceful solitude, my work, which now felt like a pathway to an even stronger, more independent future. There were challenges, of course. The divorce proceedings were lengthy and emotionally draining, despite the clear evidence. Mark, in a last-ditch effort, tried to smear my character, fabricating stories, attempting to portray me as vindictive and controlling. But Evelyn, a formidable force in the courtroom, systematically dismantled his baseless accusations, presenting irrefutable evidence of his deceit. The judge, clearly unimpressed by his theatrics, ruled decisively in my favor, granting me a substantial portion of the marital assets and a significant settlement that reflected his attempts at fraud. The house, our beautiful craftsman bungalow, became entirely mine. It was no longer a shared space filled with ghosts of a past I thought I had, but a canvas for my new life. I repainted the living room, a soft sage green, and replaced the heavy curtains with light, airy sheers. I rearranged the furniture, creating new spaces that felt distinctly mine. The scent of jasmine from the garden, once a reminder of shared evenings, now simply smelled of peace. My social circle shifted. Some friends, those who had perhaps suspected Mark's true character, rallied around me, offering unwavering support. Others, those who had been drawn to his superficial charm, drifted away, unable to reconcile the man they knew with the exposed truth. It was a painful winnowing, but ultimately, it left me with a tighter, more authentic group of connections. I started rediscovering old hobbies I'd let lapse: painting, long-distance running, attending live music concerts. Each small act of reclamation was a step towards rebuilding, not just my life, but my sense of self. The sting of betrayal never completely vanished, but it transformed. It became a scar, a reminder of what I had overcome, not a wound that festered. I learned to trust my instincts more, to listen to the subtle whispers of unease that I had once ignored. I also learned the profound strength that lies within quiet resilience, the power of strategic thinking over emotional reaction. Watching Mark's public and private downfall, seeing him stripped of his carefully constructed illusion of success and integrity, brought a deep, satisfying sense of justice. He had wanted to hurt me, to discard me publicly. But in doing so, he had paved the way for his own ruin, and for my unexpected, powerful rise. My resilience was no longer a quiet internal force, it was a visible, undeniable triumph. The ultimate rise wasn't a sudden, dramatic leap, it was a steady, intentional climb, each step upward a testament to my unwavering spirit. The woman who sat stunned and humiliated by a social media post was gone, replaced by someone stronger, more self-assured, and fiercely independent. The emotional baggage I had carried for so long, the weight of the betrayal, slowly dissipated, leaving behind a lightness I hadn't realized I was missing. My career at Sterling Corp flourished. With the renewed focus and clarity that came from disentangling my life from Mark's chaos, I channeled my energy into my work. I spearheaded a major project, a complex software integration that had been stalled for months, and brought it to a successful launch, exceeding all expectations. My dedication and strategic thinking earned me a promotion to Director of Operations, a role I hadn't even dared to aspire to before. The hum of the corporate office, once a background noise, now felt like a vibrant symphony of my own making. I loved the challenge, the collaboration, the feeling of building something meaningful. Financially, I was more secure than I had ever been. The settlement from the divorce, coupled with my increased earnings, allowed me to invest wisely, diversify my portfolio, and create a truly independent future. I no longer worried about shared finances or the whims of another person. The financial freedom was exhilarating, a tangible symbol of my autonomy. I even splurged on a solo trip to Japan, a place I had always dreamed of visiting but Mark had dismissed. Walking through ancient temples, savoring delicate sushi, and navigating bustling Tokyo streets on my own, I felt a profound sense of liberation. It was a journey of self-discovery, each new experience cementing my belief in my own resilience and capacity for joy. My personal life transformed too. The friends who had remained by my side became an invaluable support system. We shared laughter, honest conversations, and new adventures. I found a new community in a local hiking group, exploring breathtaking trails and connecting with people who shared my passion for the outdoors. There was no pressure, no expectations, just genuine connection. The warmth of these new relationships was a stark contrast to the coldness of my past marriage. I even started dating again, cautiously at first, then with more confidence. I learned to identify red flags, to trust my gut feelings, and to prioritize mutual respect and genuine connection over superficial charm. It wasn't about finding someone to complete me, it was about finding someone who appreciated the whole, complete person I had become. The independence I had cultivated was precious, and I was no longer willing to compromise it for anyone. The memory of Mark's public announcement still lingered, but it no longer held power over me. It was a distant echo, a reminder of a past self who had faced a profound betrayal and, instead of breaking, had found the strength to rebuild, stronger and more vibrant than before. His cruelty had inadvertently ignited a fire within me, a drive to prove to myself, more than anyone else, that I was capable of anything. He had tried to diminish me, to make me feel small and discarded. But his actions had, in a twisted way, become the catalyst for my greatest transformation. As I stood on my porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues, I reflected on the journey. The craftsman bungalow, now truly my home, felt filled with light and possibility. The jasmine scent was intoxicating, a sweet reminder of growth and renewal. I had faced the ultimate betrayal, the public humiliation, and I had not just survived, I had thrived. I had found justice, not through vengeance, but through intellect, foresight, and a powerful, unwavering belief in my own worth. My story wasn't just about overcoming a bad marriage, it was about the quiet, relentless power of a woman who refused to be defined by someone else's cruelty. It was about recognizing the cracks, embracing the internal struggle, and ultimately, unleashing a surprise that was far more powerful than any public announcement. If this journey from betrayal to empowerment moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of unbreakable spirits. Share in the comments, have you ever had to rise above someone's cruelty? Your story could inspire